Okay, yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last installment on the mini school on how to write and publish papers in famous mathematical journals. And I think maybe in a few months' time, we could have the mini school how to become a Fields medalist. Yeah. That I think would also be very interesting. Yeah. So I don't think I need to introduce the two speakers. You met them already 3 times this month. Yeah, Professor Amartya Goswami, Professor Zurab Janelidze, and today they tell me they will have a kind of a joint approach to round up this mini school. Yeah. But Amartya and Zurab, please, you're welcome to start. And I think the participants know the rule of the game. If you have questions, please use the Q&A. And maybe at the end of the talk, we can give you the right to ask questions or make comments in person. Yeah, so Amartya and Zurab, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Francesco. We have 3 topics that we plan to talk about today. But if there is some any other topics that the members of the participants would like to propose, please do so. You can write it in the chat, and then after these 3, we will also try to address those. So would you like to begin, Amartya, for firstly, are you happy with the ordering? I kind of
yeah, absolutely fine. Okay, the first thing today we like to discuss or talk about is the comparison between collaborative work and working alone. And of course, both of them are good or bad, depends on our personal tastes, as well as there are advantages and disadvantages on both aspects. So when we collaborate, that's one of the standard question. One of the specific context when we collaborate is that if the topic of our research or the paper, what we wanted to work on, is involved several skills or several areas which all of me personally we don't know, or we don't have enough sufficient knowledge or the skill to work on the topic or the problem. In such case, we actually invite or we just look for a person who might be interested for such a collaboration. And in that case, we use, or there could be more than one collaborators, depending on the complicacy or of the project. And nowadays, it is also very standard practice that there are more authors compared to in past, because if we go back 100 years ago, there were much more single author papers than the currently what we see, because things are getting complicated. Specifically, if you work on mainstream mathematics, then you will find that most of these papers are actually collaborative work. So we must actually check that what kind of collaborations we need, and accordingly we need to look for people who works on the related areas or the topics what we need that. Now, how to choose such people? So that depends on the project. First, we just look that the project involved, when we actually working on the project, automatically we look the references on which the work has been done. And then automatically that will give us some kind of guidance that who are the experts in this field, or who has the potential knowledge or potential collaborators in this respect. And then we actually approach or write to them, possibly by email, and explain in details the whole project. And please don't feel shy to explain in details, because if you write very sketchy and very gist way the topic, then automatically it may happen that the person whom you are approaching might not get the whole picture and get disinterested on that. So try to explain the purpose of the project, what is the project is all about, and exactly what kind of help or what kind of assistance or what kind of input from that person you are expecting. Because to make it precise, you can't say that, no, it will be great if you join me. I mean, everybody is busy and everybody has his or her own project. So it should be as precise as possible with respect to this approach of this invitation, that I precisely need this kind of help in this kind of problem in this project from you. If the person is busy, maybe he can say, no, I'm not currently available. Then he can just stop their writing. Or if he says such things, then you may ask, will you kindly recommend someone that whom you think that is suitable to help me in this respect? Because sometimes recommendation also really helpful, which I personally got such feedback from people originally whom I approached was not available, but then the person recommended another person, and then collaboration can start on that. So these are the when we have this collaborative effect, the workload automatically divides, and that's an advantage of it. And then we all put our brains together on the project. So it's not that you take the all responsibility or the risk of the whole project and correctness of the whole project. So all contributes from our own sides. And if there are more than two eyes are looking at the paper, the finished one, then of course it is much easier to find the mistakes. And if there are more than one suggestions from the project, then that's also make the paper better. So these are the big advantages of having collaborations, apart from the fact that when it is absolutely necessary to collaborate, when we have a lack of skill or expertise with respect to the project. Some negative or not so much advantages, or rather disadvantages of the collaboration may happen is that when you collaborate with people, depending on their level of expertise or how experienced is that person, unless you collaborate with your student, people can be busy. And that can make your process delayed, in the sense of maybe you wanted to finish the whole project in, say, n months of time. But because of your collaborators much more involved in other projects, either academic or in other research projects, so it may happen that the amount of progress you are expecting in the whole project is not happening in that way. So it is very natural that apart from the fact that mathematics is completely uncertain when we are wanted to solve some problem which is not obvious, when we don't know actually where to solve. Apart from that fact that we have our other commitments, and because of that commitments, it may happen that the project gets delayed. So the general advice is that don't get frustrated or get impatient about such things, because we are all human beings, and we have our own responsibilities. And this unwanted delay from the collaborator side, it could be absolutely natural. So, because remember that we approach the collaborators because we need help. And now, if for some reason, if it does not happening with the progress what we wanted, with the speed what we wanted, then we must try to understand what is happening, be humble and considerate with your collaborators, and try to understand what is happening there. So this is one of the possible so-called negative things what may happen, but depends on the collaborators' availability or interest on the project. So that may not be so vital. Compared to that, single authored papers is you don't have such problems. You are completely in control of that. So the time factor is needed is completely determined you. So at the amount of time you can put on the project, that will accelerate the speed of the project and you can complete it. And of course, then you are the complete authority on the whole project. That means whatever the suggestions you come up, that will be yourself. So any kind of so-called possible conflict of interest, or you don't agree with this idea or that idea, or naturally those kind of things will not happen. But on the other side, the negative side, in some sense, are you will be completely responsible for the project. So its correctness, is novelty, is complexity, is it good enough to be published? Is it good enough to be published in a Q1 journal? All need to be decided and determined by yourself. So that gives you in some way, if you are in an early career mathematician or just a student, that gives you some kind of enrichment or development on your side to be independent. So it is helpful, but sometimes it is also it is also a problem that we may not see the problem from another aspect, or we may not consider another aspect, because we may think that what we are doing alone is exceptional, and every aspects of the problem I have covered, so I'm completely satisfied with it. But when you even writing a single author paper, it is sometimes good to not to have, even if you do not want it to have a collaborator, but to actually, to once you finish it, just to show it or to send it to some expert and to get some feedback. Because even if without collaborators, there are many people who are very much willing to give you the feedback on your work, and that is also sometimes extremely helpful to enrich your paper. So these are more or less the pros and cons of both types of works, like joint work or the single author paper. Zurab, you would like to add something here?
No, I think you covered everything quite comprehensively.
Thank you.
I don't think I want to add. Maybe I can just add one point that in terms of how to collaborate. So you spoke a lot about already having a project and then finding a suitable person that you want to collaborate with on this project. But very often projects arise as a result of spontaneous discussion between two mathematicians. And then if you had some spontaneous discussion without necessarily an intention to collaborate, just sharing of mathematical knowledge, this could give rise to a topic that both of you might be excited about and want to collaborate on this topic. And so this is also why going to conferences is very important, because the conferences are the environment where you can have such spontaneous meetings with other people. And very often it could lead to very, very fruitful collaboration and
absolutely
entirely new topics that you might not have thought of before. So this is another way of finding a collaborator, by simply by approaching people and talking mathematics with them without necessarily an intention to collaborate, just sharing mathematics, and then the discussion might lead naturally to a collaboration. Another way that collaborations could arise is to ask a clever question after or during the person has given a talk. So for instance, in my field, in category theory, which was the field itself was a result of collaborations of Saunders MacLean and Samuel Eilenberg. And the story is that MacLean was giving a talk about something from algebra, and Eilenberg noticed that what he was talking about looked very similar to something that he worked with in topology. Maybe I'm not telling the story very accurately, but it's less important. And so they started chatting about this commonality that was identified during giving a talk. So asking a question or simply listening to a talk of another mathematician could give rise to an idea for possible collaboration. So it's not always the case that you already know exactly what you want to do and then you just find a collaborator for it. Sometimes that happens as well, but also it happens that the topic emerges through interactions, mostly at conferences. But of course, you can also have other interactions with your colleagues in your department, for instance, or you could simply invite some person to visit you without knowing if there will be a collaboration coming out of it or not, and then talk about mathematics, and then it could lead some collaboration on a topic that you both identify. So that's maybe the only thing I'd add there.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very important point, because there are several aspects or possibilities of collaborations that can happen. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Then we can move to perhaps the next topic, which is how to choose a journal. Would you like to also perhaps lead the conversation on this one, Amartya? I'll be making notes as we speak, and then I can also contribute maybe at the end.
Sure. So choosing a journal is sometimes, I mean, of course, there is no perfect algorithm to choose a journal. There is no 100% correct approach of choosing a journal. There are some practices which we can share with you, which you can try. So first thing is, which journal should we approach? So for example, if our topic is in, say, in analysis, of course we are not going to choose a journal which is in algebra, pure algebra or something like that, because that's highly unlikely that such a journal will accept our paper. So that is obvious thing. Then the question is, the moment once we, I mean, this question of choosing a journal only come to our mind once we finish our work and it's completely ready for submission. And by the way, we personally prefer, or rather suggest, that once your work is completely done and ready for submission, also we encourage you to upload it on archive. That's a very, very good open access platform. And it also helps you in many ways. One of them is that your work is publicly available, and if anybody can cite it even before it has been officially published in any journals. And also sometimes you get feedback from other people who is reading these archive papers. So that is also very, very important thing. And copyright things also sometimes helps you, because maybe your paper is delaying in actual publications, but somebody else is working on that paper and get published, but your paper is always ready in archive. So if it is a similar results, then one can actually tell that no, this paper actually, this work already been done before that, but officially it has not been published. So choosing journal, first thing what we need to do, once the paper is completed, automatically we have a bibliography or references in the paper. And references are those papers or works, apart from the books, which are relevant with respect to the paper what we have just written. So naturally, the journals where those papers have been published are the first target or the first choices for us, because those are the similar type of work, the similar type of topic actually been published in those journals. But it may happen that most of your references, if not all of them, are a little bit older reference, maybe 10 years old. Maybe you are working on a project where the last reference what you have included is 10 years old reference. That can happen. If that is not the case, if you have the latest references, say published last year, or people maybe 2 years ago, then life is much easier. Then you actually look for the journals where those papers actually been published. And here one need to be a little bit careful before choosing the journals from the list in your references, because we do two kind of references, actually citations in our paper. One mostly appears in the introduction, and it may happen we include references in the introduction, citing them because it is relevant to our work. But actually, it may happen we haven't used any specific results from those papers in our paper. That means after the introduction, those references never appears in our paper. So if you have to choose between the references which only appear in the introduction and the references which also appears in the body of our paper, then I suggest you mostly go for the references which appear in the body of the paper, because that's exactly where we are using those results from the other papers. So if those papers are published in XYZ journals, and if we have used actually the results from those papers in our paper, then our work is much more related to their works, and it much more makes sense to approach those journals for the submission of our paper. Now, it may happen that the references, the journals where these papers actually published, most of them may be in a very high quartile journals, or maybe they are low quartile journals. Now, how to choose that, which kind of quartiles we should choose? We shouldn't randomly just pick up one of the journals which appears in the references, and because it is Q1, I should also submit to Q1. We must honestly and thoroughly scrutinize our own paper and check what is the level of complexity, what is the level of novelty, what Zurab actually explained in the last lecture. Because the paper mostly get accepted in a higher ranking journals. Most of them actually depends at least on these two factors, is the complexity and the novelty. So if the reference paper has a very high level of novelty and or complexity, then it was expected that it has been published, say, in Q1 journal. But you may have done more routine work, and your results may not have such a high quality of results, or high non-trivial results, or complexity is not of that level. Then it is better to look for similar journals which publish the results but may not be in the same quartiles as the reference journal is published. But it is completely up to you to decide. And if you do an honest scrutiny of your own paper, more or less you will have an idea that which range of journals will be suitable for the submission of my paper. Of course, one should start from the topmost of your list. Once you make a list of journals, that these are the journals where I can possibly submit it, of course one should start from the top of the list, not from the bottom of the list. And if it gets rejected immediately, then because of the not suitability, and that can happen, then that was the reason what I was telling, that if your references are very old, then it may happen that the journal XYZ was catering for those kind of topics 10 years ago, but they are not anymore interested in those areas and now at the current time. So in that case, you completely need to rethink about the choice of journals. And in that case, you have to, for example, search on the MathSciNet using the keywords of your paper, and maybe you can actually use Springer website or Elsevier websites, because there are many journal websites actually have very nice software where you can actually paste your abstract and you can paste the keywords there and actually ask them to suggest, and then Springer or Elsevier or Taylor references or any other. I'm not sure all journals, all companies have such facility, but I have seen at least few of them. Then they actually give a series of journals where you can, where according to the matching, your paper can be submitted. But of course, these are just mere suggestions, and from those journals, you can actually check what papers they have been published recently. Always go for the recent publication, because in past, the picture could be completely different. And in present scenario, maybe they have changed completely their approach or the topic. So that is very, very important. So this is one of the way how you can think of a journal. And we personally like you to suggest you to go for non-paid journals, because generally non-paid journals, you are expecting the referee process. Of course, it will be much longer process for referring the things in general, but go for non-paid journals, go for standard journals like ISI journals. And automatically, if you go for the higher ranking journals, you don't need to think about whether it's a good journal or bad journal in some sense. But if you are not sure about the very high ranking, then we suggest for going for non-paid journals, but that's our personal suggestions. Zurab?
Yeah, so maybe I'll add that, I mean, very important thing to keep in mind is that, I mean, we spoke about quality, but quality has two aspects. One is actual quality, the other is also quality in the context of competition. So there are limited resources. For instance, a journal like, for instance, Annals of Mathematics, which is one of the, which is considered as one of the historically considered and also nowadays one of the most high quality journals in mathematics. They only publish a certain amount of papers every year. And so they will have to make some kind of selection. They will have to decide which paper goes in there and which doesn't. This quality should be seen also in combination with competitiveness of the journal. And so the fact that your paper doesn't get accepted in a high-ranking journal doesn't necessarily mean it's of bad quality. It's just that from the profile of the journal, you lost the competition, basically. Different journals have different profiles. Very often it depends on the editor that is handling your paper. Very often it does not depend so much on the individual editor, because editors often share with each other their perspectives. But very often it does depend on the individual editor. So it could be a misjudgment of the individual editor if they didn't accept your paper. So, so in light of all of this, one should be realistic in terms of assessing where your paper will kind of win the competition. And you might be very passionate about what you did, and you might consider it to be a very important work, and yet it might not win all the competitions, and that's okay. If I am very good at running, right, I'm not going to be able to win a competition for jumping. So I might be a very good runner, but it doesn't mean I'm going to win a competition for jumping. So you might have a paper that is of very high quality, but if you send it to a journal with a different profile than what your paper presents, even though it's high quality, your paper might not get accepted in that journal.
Yeah.
So one should be realistic as to what the profile of the journal is and whether your topic fits in the profile, so you know that your work will be appreciated. Of course, there are cases where you yourself acknowledge that maybe this is not the best paper you produced. Maybe the results are not so interesting. It's still worth publishing. But if you were yourself an editor, you would maybe even reject your own paper if you're editor for a very high-ranking journal. And so that's okay to acknowledge that, and then so in that case you would not send your paper to a high-ranking journal. You would send it to a lower-ranking journal if you still think that it's worth publishing. The way to determine what the profile of a journal is basically twofold. One is to look at the description of what the journal says their profile is, and the other one is to look at the profile of editors. Very often the journal will say, we publish papers in these and these areas, but then actually, because the editorial board only has maybe specific knowledge and interest in sub-disciplines of those areas, they might discard your work if it doesn't fall exactly within their knowledge. So just looking at the description of what the journal says they will publish is not enough. You also want to look at the expertise of the editors. So if you if you find an editor that is really an expert of the topic in which your paper is, then you know that this journal is the right journal for you, as long as you've assessed the ranking correctly. But if you haven't found any such editor, then you might still want to try and send it to the journal if the journal's profile is close enough to the topic of your paper. But then you have to kind of approximate, see which editor was most likely to understand your paper. Remember, the editor needs to understand what is happening in your paper from a very general perspective. The editor will have some kind of general opinion. What kind of paper is this? And then a more refined and more professional opinion will be generated by the referee, the anonymous referee that the editor sends your paper to. But very often, the editor won't even send it to a referee if they feel that your work, if they already from your abstract and introduction, let's say, they feel that your work isn't suitable for the journal or isn't of required quality. So editors' knowledge and expertise is very important to take into account when you're choosing a journal. So I would maybe add these points. Let me just type this up. So editor's expertise and journal description, match that with the topic field of your paper. And in terms of paid journals and free journals, if you want your paper to be open access, sometimes journals ask fees for that. But if the journals ask fees, even if the paper is not open access, they just ask fees. I haven't actually seen a high quality journal in mathematics that does that. So if a journal is a paid journal, there's a chance, there's a big chance that it's actually a poor quality journal. And so you don't want to publish in poor quality journals. Of course, poor quality journal will accept almost any paper, right? But then it will ruin your reputation. Your CV will have that journal's name. It will definitely ruin your reputation, especially if you have many of them. You don't want to do that. So you want to make sure that the journal is respectable journal, and you can try to make sure of that by looking at the editors. Who are the editors? If the editors are people you know of, they're famous people in your field maybe, then you can trust them that they wouldn't be editors of a journal that's a bad journal. But if you don't know any of the editors and you try to look up their work, and their work is either completely unrelated or you can't even find a lot of work they have completed. So you have to be very careful in that case. You don't want to have those bad journals in your CV.
Yeah. Recently, I heard that there are some good analysis journals which are paid journals, but they are very good quality. But honestly speaking, I don't know them. So, as you said, one should look the journal, how good is the journal, who are the editors in that journal. Otherwise, I mean, if you have an opportunity to publish in a non-paid journals, which are good journals, better to go for that one. Yeah, so in a nutshell, is not the paid or unpaid. The actual idea is the quality of the journal, what actually Zurab is writing. So, so don't take this money. I mean, apart from this open access, that's a different story. But the main point is that check the quality of the journal, and if the quality is excellent, for example, if it is a Q1 journal, then definitely you can expect that it will be a good evaluations of your paper.
All right, shall we move on to to the next one? There's actually a question in the chat which I think relates to this topic. What about the double-blind peer review policy of the journal if paper is already uploaded on archive? Is this negatively affect acceptance of chances of manuscript in open access journals if it is already available in archive? Actually, to be completely honest, I do not know. I've never had to work in a setup where the peer reviewers are not able to see the author of the paper they're reviewing. I know that in other fields this is practice, but in mathematics I haven't seen that. I've definitely seen that in, let's say, mathematics education, but not in mathematics. So I don't know the answer to this. I would imagine that it could negatively affect, and then you might actually want to then ask the editor if it is okay or not. As you're submitting your paper, or maybe even before you're submitting, just ask the editors, ask the journal what their take on this is. I'm sorry that I'm not able to answer that. I don't have experience to answer that. I don't know if you have it, Amartya.
No, I also never heard any kind of where they hide the author's name, because that's very common practice in pure mathematics, that they even know the whole paper is actually sent to the referee.
Yeah, so in mathematics, I have never seen that. Yeah.
And also, I haven't seen any journal which objects to submit your or upload your paper on archive before publications or even after publications. So absolutely, in general, no clash between these two.
Yeah, so the comment there was that this is in computer science. I don't think that maybe some of the suggestions we give is also valid for computer science, but I don't think that this mini school should be applied. The knowledge from this mini school should be applied to computer science directly. There are many differences. For example, one of the differences is that in computer science, you very often publish in conference proceedings, and these are regarded as very high quality publications, whereas in mathematics, that's not the tradition. So there are lots of differences in details of publication, and so the advices and suggestions we've been giving in this school, they're suitable for mathematics. Some of them might not be applicable or suitable for computer science, unfortunately.
I see you already answered the question and Q&A. Okay, thank you.
Of course, there are a lot of mathematicians or computer scientists who do computer science or mathematics in such a way that it's both mathematics and computer science. Then our advices are applicable, but purely kind of computer science computer science paper that doesn't really have mathematics explicitly in it. Those kinds of papers is the ones where our advices might not work. All right, so then the third topic we wanted to discuss is
maybe you start.
Yeah. Sorry.
Maybe you start.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So how to write the abstract and the introduction, and this is actually very important to write them very well. And the reason why this is very important is because it gives the first impression to the editor. The editor might decide not to even send your paper to a referee based on what they read, perhaps already sometimes even in the abstract. So your abstract should. So let's first talk about the abstract and then the introduction. Now remember that mathematics is a field of basic science. So we are doing science in mathematics. Mathematics can also be viewed as a form of art, but when we are publishing mathematics, this is a scientific output. It's not an artistic output. Of course, there is some art in science, obviously, but in terms of the end result actually is a scientific discovery. So your abstract should make it very clear what these discoveries are. Your abstract shouldn't be talking about the methodology used to arrive at them. Your abstract shouldn't be talking about what inspired you to look at this topic. Your abstract should be talking about what scientific novelty does your paper bring? What is the end result of all the work you put in behind the paper? So the abstract should make it very clear. And there might be many results that come out from your work, so it should make it very clear what the main results are. Result or results of your paper is or are. Now, but this should be taken literally. So you might think, okay, so if the abstract should make it very clear, then let me just write the statement of the theorem in the abstract. You don't want to do that because remember, abstract is short. So you also want to summarize your theorems in the abstract in such a way that it's still clear what the theorems are, but at the same time, it should be also very clear why these results are interesting. So the abstract should make it very clear not only what the results are, but also make very clear why one should care about these results. And this is not about why one should care about the methodology, why one should care about the inspiration. No, it's the results that one should care and why one should care about them. Now it's very subtle in mathematics to do something like this, because mathematics in itself is basic science, and it's kind of core basic science in the sense it's in its core, it's maybe least applicable than anything else, right? But then at the same time, it's also ends up being most applicable in some sense. So when you're describing why one should care, this is not about explaining where in engineering will they use your result necessarily, but rather is explaining what contribution does it make to mathematics. Of course, if your results are also applicable beyond mathematics, you definitely have to mention that in the abstract. If these applications are clear results, if these applications are just some hypothesis or something like that, you don't want to necessarily mention that in the abstract, because, as I said, the abstract should be about results, the actual things that you have established, rather than your guesses. Okay. So it should make it very clear why are these results interesting or relevant, and that is also very important. And so because the abstract is then short, if you formulate everything very precisely, exactly what you proved, then you might not have space to formulate why these results are important. So you end up describing the main results more intuitively, more in less rigorous terms, but then at the same time complementing that with an indication as to where, how, or why are they interesting. You might not even explicitly write yourself, this is interesting because of that, but the expert reading your abstract can infer this from the way you link your result with the existing literature, and that's another thing. The abstract should make it very clear how your results or result links with the rest of mathematics. So this is where also the person reading the abstract should be able to see what is known and what is yours. What is the novelty that's coming from this paper, and how it links with the things that are known. So let me add in the first bullet point, let me add here main new results. And lastly, the abstract should excite the reader. Of course, if you're working in high-level pure mathematics, you won't be able to excite a chemist reading your abstract, because the chemist might not understand the technical terminology you will have to use in describing your results. But it should excite the reader of that journal in which you're publishing. So earlier, Professor Goswami said that you first write a paper, and then you select the journal, but this is 99%, this is so, but sometimes you do want to rewrite your abstract based on the journal you send your paper to, because if you now decided you're going to send your paper to a broader journal than you originally planned for, you don't want to have overly technical terminology already in the abstract. You do want the readership of that wider journal to be able to appreciate what you did. On the other hand, if you decide to send your paper to a very specialized journal, you don't want to talk in very general terms just to be accessible, because now the reader of that journal already knows a lot, and they want to see more detail and more depth from your abstract. So the abstract should excite the reader of that journal to which you're sending the paper, and it has many components in it, as I hinted on. Of course, we don't want there to be any mistakes, any language mistakes in the whole paper, but definitely not in the abstract. If you're writing your paper in English, the abstract should have perfect English, because if already the abstract has punctuation mistakes, spelling mistakes, it already will be an indication to the reader that you're careless. And nobody wants to read text written by a careless person, because it will take a lot of effort to figure out their mistakes and fix them and then continue reading. Sometimes you need to fix mistakes in order to continue reading to understand what it says. So language becomes very important. At least, I mean, if you're struggling to write perfect English, then at least try to make sure that the abstract is perfectly English. Would you like to add anything on the abstract side before I say a few things about the introduction, Amartya?
No, I think you have covered everything. Only one general practice is that it is better not to cite any reference on the abstract, because that reference may not be completely available. So if it is absolutely necessary to cite something, then better to cite the whole thing, not just give some kind of hyperlink, because the hyperlink may leads to the to the reference, and yeah, something like that. So that may create a problem. And what Zurab mentioned, this connection is very important to show why your results are good enough, or in what sense it is connecting with the existing one. And that kind of comparison in a very short form is very much needed here to justify your thing. So it should be very appealing. What Zurab was trying to say, that it should make your reader very excited. If it looks like a very stereotype routine exercises, reading your abstract, even if you have some good result, that immediately disappoint the referee, or at least the editor. So try to make it precise, make it as excited without any extra personal emotion adding in some words. Make it in a true scientific way. Yeah, I think that's it, more or less.
Yeah, it should be concise, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. So now the introduction. The introduction of a paper is a bit different to the introduction of a book. But even for a book, and it's definitely different to introduction of a book in literature. So in a mathematical paper, and this probably is true for other scientific disciplines and basic sciences at least, but maybe not always, but definitely in mathematics, your introduction should not only kind of introduce the topic of your paper to the reader, it should also explain what the main results are in more detail than you did that in the abstract. So everything is the same as in the abstract. All the requirements of the abstract apply to the introduction, but now here you go in more detail. That's one of the conditions that your introduction should satisfy. You do have to describe your main results in the introduction, but in more detail than you did so in the abstract. You do have to explain why one should care about these results, but in more detail than in the abstract. You don't want to just copy-paste sentences from the abstract. You want to go in depth into them. You do want to explain very clearly how this links with the rest of mathematics, giving extensive literature. Except that, so when we said here that you don't give references in the form of like reference 1, reference 2, you don't include it in the abstract, but the introduction you do. So let me just add that, except that something like this is allowed in the introduction. The abstract should excite the reader of the journal, but the introduction should excite them even more. After reading the introduction, the reader should be completely convinced that, provided all the mathematical details in your paper are correct, which is still to be checked by the reader perhaps, that your paper is an absolutely beautiful and significant paper in the scope that is promised in the introduction. So you do want to create very, very positive disposition of the reader towards your paper, but not Not exaggerated though, right? So do not exaggerate. This is very important as well. Now, this is maybe very important to say after what we've been saying, that do not exaggerate. I forgot how to spell exaggerate. Can you maybe help me, Amartya, to figure out the spelling? Do not exaggerate the importance, relevance, or scope of your results. You want to give a very accurate description of the importance, relevance, scope, not to exaggerate it. If a mathematician reads your introduction, maybe if a journalist reads your introduction, they will be fascinated by the exaggeration and they will invite you for an interview. But as soon as a mathematician will read your introduction, if the mathematician will conclude that you've exaggerated, they might never speak to you again. Not to mention not read your papers. So you don't want to exaggerate the importance, relevance, or scope of your results. You want to be very humble, but at the same time, do not underestimate them either. Remember, you still want to excite the reader. So if you, for example, solved an open problem, you want to say that. You want to say that in this paper you solved this and this problem that has been open, right? But now, if you solve the problem that you invented just before writing this paper, and nobody has thought of this problem or even anything closely related to it before, and then in your introduction say you solved an open problem, this is clear exaggeration, and so there will be a very bad reaction to this attitude by the mathematical community. So do not underestimate your results, your significance of your work, but also do not exaggerate them. It is also very useful if the introduction gives a summary of each section of your paper, and if there are many sections, if there are too many sections that your paper has, include a table of contents. Now, you can also include acknowledgements in the introduction, but usually they go at the end. Acknowledgements. Maybe you spoke about this topic with someone. They didn't end up being co-author of your paper, but they did contribute to your. Even if you got inspired to think of something after speaking to someone, you still want to acknowledge that person. It's always nice to do that, and also then the person will be also kind of appreciative of what you did, and they will very positively they will interact very positively with you in the future as well. So acknowledge anyone who contributed to your work, but this can also be included in the end of the paper. Can be instead included. You don't want to do this twice. Either do it in the introduction or at the end. Can be instead included as a separate paragraph at the end of the paper. And this kind of already is implied by what we said earlier, but I just want to stress it one more time that you do want to explain the connection with the existing literature accurately. You want an accurate explanation of this. You might not want to do this in the rest of the paper. Explain the connection with the existing literature accurately, and make it very clear exactly what is new in the paper, what is your contribution, what is new in the paper, and what was already known in the literature. You do want to be very accurate about this, because if you claim something is new and it is not new, it will already give the editor and the referee a negative disposition, that they will think that you're lying, and so they will approach your paper in a negative way. They might be frustrated with this, and that they might even reject your paper just because of their feeling that you're exaggerating your contribution. Oops, I think I did something bad. The text, sorry. Well, the video recorded it, but the first couple of lines disappeared because of the way I was typing it. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think I would. I'm done on the introduction. Anything else you want to add, Amartya?
First, regarding this acknowledgement, we like to very much stress the very important thing is, if you are a NITheCS associate, you must or you should include NITheCS affiliations as one of your affiliations, not in the acknowledgement, but in actually where you actually write your your university or institutional address, but as your second address or your third address, depending on how many your institutional address you have, but you must include NITheCS affiliations. This is the way how we can actually say thanks to NITheCS as to be part of this big family in some sense. So please make sure every published papers has this NITheCS affiliation. Zurab, you have mentioned very well all the points there. Just to add a little remark about this connecting your work with the existing literature, it is better to have references by different authors, if possible, rather than taking, say, 5 or 10 papers by the same author. As to justify why this work is so important. It may happen that more than one paper or by the same author make a big contributions. Of course, you should include, but to make your work acceptable by a wider audience, it is naturally expected by the editor or the referee that how relevant your work with respect to the existing body of the work. And from that perspective, it is better to cover as many varieties of authors' works as possible, because that also gives a different aspects of the work. And this preciseness, what Zurab mentioned, is very important, that one shouldn't just write that this work is a generalizations from this book, or this is a generalizations of this paper, because that kind of statement does not make sense. And if it is a specific result from some paper you are generalizing or extending, even you can literally write down the whole statement from that paper, citing it properly, and then you mention, okay, this is my result, and then you compare. Because this kind of preciseness is very much attractive to the editor, because editor completely see exactly what you are improving on, instead of you are hiding or you are making it vague. So make it more precise and be honest with your own work with humbleness actually gives a better chance to paper get accepted in a better journal. Yeah, I think that's it from the introduction side, and I think our time is also...
Yes, we should pass this back now to Professor Johannesburg. Francesca, over to you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Sorry, I was fighting with my video. Thank you very much. I see we have one question in the Q. Oh no, okay, in the Q&A. Just thank you so much. Sorry, and I think there are no.
Somebody has raised a hand, I think.
Yeah. Sorry. I didn't see that. Yes, here. Sorry, just a second. Here we go. Voila. Tandila, you're welcome to unmute and you can ask the question in person. Here we go.
Okay. Hi, Prof.
Hi.
Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask a question that's a bit off the topic a bit. So I had tried to join NITheCS using the last, like on the page at the bottom, there's where you can send a message. It's just that I've never received a response. So I just wanted to ask, how do I join as an associate?
Whom did you send, Tandila, the message?
At the bottom of the page, there's something that's written name and surname, email address, cell phone number, and the message that you send.
Yeah,
So
but that is to register for the newsletter. Do you receive our newsletter, Tandila?
No, I haven't seen anything as yet.
Okay, then Tandila, maybe send me an email and I will ask Rene to check whether you are in the mailing list of the newsletter. Yeah, and you know, and to become an associate, we changed the system last year, and now you need to find an existing associate, for instance, Zurab or Amartya, to nominate you. Yeah, and the deadline is tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you know, we can unofficially wait a couple of days. Yeah, that's not a drama. Yeah, because we want to have every year a call for new associates, and we want existing associates to nominate potential new associates. Yeah, so maybe you can chat to Zurab and Amartya, and maybe they can recommend you. Yeah.
Okay, Prof, thank you.
Excellent. No, thank you very much. Are there questions? No, let's answer the thank you very much so that we don't see the question. No other raised hand.
There was actually, Francesco, there was actually a question in Q&A which I already answered. That's why there was a
Yeah,
thank
no,
you.
no,
Because,
no, there was just a thank you, and I looked it up again. Yeah, okay.
maybe, sorry, another quick question in the chat. Is it fine if we answer that as well very quickly?
Yeah, no, please. The one about double blind. Yeah.
Is there any, no, that one I already answered, but
Yeah,
is there any restriction to dedicate a paper to someone? No, there isn't really a restriction. Usually papers are dedicated to other mathematicians, but if you want to dedicate it to your family member, or sometimes I've seen some people like to dedicate their paper to God. You might want to check with the journal if they would allow these dedications outside of the scope of mathematics. But if you're dedicating your paper to another mathematician, then most journals should be fine with that.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, if there are no more urgent questions, then Zurab and Amartya, on behalf of all the participants, thank you very much for a very nice and instructive mini school. I think it's very important to have mini schools that are not only technical, but also introduce some kind of secondary skills that are sometimes more important than the primary skills. Yeah? Because you can be as good as you want. If you don't know how to sell your results, it doesn't really help anyone. Yeah? So that's really very nice. And I'm pretty sure we should advertise this also amongst non-mathematicians, yeah, because they can also probably learn very valuable lessons on how to approach the writing of papers, in particular if it is the first paper that people start writing. Yeah. So Zurab and Amartya, thank you very much for your efforts and your continuous contribution to the NITheCS efforts. Yeah. And thank you to the online participants. And the moment you've written a paper, please send me a copy. So, so that we see if the mini school had an impact or not. Yeah, that would be very nice. You can dedicate the paper to the mini school. Yeah. Yeah, so that we can follow and monitor that the mini school was successful. Yeah. So, but thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day. And next week we will start the next mini school. Yeah. And I've forgotten what the topic is.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Amartya. Thank you, Zurab. Have a good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.